Good evening. So, the discussion today is going to be about the indwelling logos, which is the core of Gnosticism. Now, if you're on some Facebook group or you're on some other YouTube channel, you may have heard of Gnosticism. And if you did, you probably learned about a lot of stuff which simply isn't true. And it has to do with all kinds of symbols and sex and magic and all kinds of weird stuff, which has nothing to do with Gnosticism. In fact, Gnosticism is the exact opposite of that. And years ago, I got kicked out of a Facebook group Facebook group that was a Gnostic Facebook group for rejecting all of the things that they were saying that was Gnosticism, which it really isn't. And what Gnosticism really is the philosophy of Heraclitus and the philosophers of Athens who developed this concept of Gnosticism. It didn't come from anywhere else. Gnosticism came from Athens and it spread to Judea. It didn't come from anywhere else. That is the origin of Gnosticism. It's not paganism. It's not numerology. It's not astrology. It's not sex magic. It's not anything else other than the worship and the discipleship under logos. The worship and discipleship, or better yet, the discipleship of logos, the indwelling logos. Now, there's a lot of people talking on the media, on all the major cable channels, and people are making movies in Hollywood, and people have radio shows, and people have TV shows, and people make sitcoms, and they make documentaries, and they do investigative journalism, and people do a lot of things. And actually, most of those things are pretty irrelevant to your life if you don't know what the logos is. And the thing that I'm going to tell you is the most important thing you could ever know. It's the most important thing that you could ever know, because no matter what happens to you, or how old you are, or how young you are, or where you are in life, or what's occurring around you, the most important thing to know is what is the logos. The logos is the most important thing to know. And what is the logos? The logos is a Greek word, which basically where we get in English the word logic and reason. And it's logic and reason, but it's rooted in truth. And the logos is indwelling because it's not something you get from somebody else. Somebody doesn't give you the logos. You don't get the logos from a university or from a kindergarten teacher or from a pastor or a priest or a rabbi or a Muslim imam or anywhere else. You can't get the logos from anyone outside of yourself because the logos is part of your own soul. And so this is Gnosticism. It's completely devoid of any symbolism or paganism or magical thinking or anything else. True Gnosticism. There is no true Gnosticism on YouTube that I've seen. It just doesn't exist. And people that write books about Gnosticism tend to not know anything about it because these same people are writing books about how Jesus lived in India or some other nonsense, frankly, that's not true. My good friend Jordan Maxwell spent his life trying to explain to people that Jesus is an allegory about the truth and about the light which was put to death at Golgotha. And then people who run his YouTube channel today will upload a video about how Jesus went to India, which did not happen. Okay. I assure you, Jesus did not go to India or anywhere else in the world because Jesus is the logos and it's a story about the logos. It's an allegory about the logos. And the logos came from Athens and the logos spread to Judea. And the logos is the only way to get to theos, which is where you get the word theism, God. Deism comes from theism, which is how the Greeks described this divine source of the universe, not a pagan god. It's not Zeus. It's not something else. Theos means the divine source or father of the universe, the creator of the universe. Theos cannot be understood or described because it's not part of the universe. So theos can only be understood through the logos, which is the truth. Reason, rooted in truth. That's the only way to understand theos. So the logos is the gateway to theos. The logos is the gateway to theos. Logos means reason, rooted in truth. It began with Heraclitus as the idea that the universe and the motion of the universe and the different waves of the universe are rooted in natural law, which is an idea. And this law was called the logos. It's a governing principle of the universe. So it can apply to natural law and it can apply to the law of one's soul. The law of one's soul. So logos is the indwelling truth that lives within you and your soul, lives within your soul, which is you. So the point of Gnosticism, if you understand it properly, is all of this wisdom of God is within you. Okay, it's within you and it can be found within you. And that's why in Luke 17:21, Jesus says, the kingdom of God is within you. And people misquote that and they misrepresent it and they misinterpret it to mean something else because they don't want to understand that Jesus is the logos, the indwelling truth that lives within you. And this is what was killed at Golgotha, at the skull, by the rabbis. They don't want to know that. They want to believe that it's something out there, that it's out in space. And so you have to understand that there is nothing to the universe, without getting too complicated. There's no wisdom out in the universe. There's no truth out in the universe. There's no God waiting for you outside in the universe. The universe is like when you're having a dream at night. This is a good example. And in your dream, maybe you're looking over a landscape and you see the ocean and you see the sky. And how far does it go? It goes forever, right? Because it's an illusion. It goes forever. But when you wake up, it's gone, right? Because it was never, it's not that it's not real. I'm not saying it's not real. It is real because it's the manifestation of thought, okay? But now we're getting too complicated because that's not what this video is about. But it does explain this idea of people believing that there's going to be this outside source telling them things, right? This is a false concept, that there's going to be something like the universe has some wisdom somewhere and it's going to instruct you. It's not coming from the universe. The universe is the three-dimensional appearance of thought. So ideas appear as 3D images, objects, spaces, and energies, okay? So thoughts appear, just like when you think of something and you see it in your mind, the universe appears the exact same way. So there's, just like your mind, when you think of a thought, you see the image. Maybe you remember a friend or you think of something that you're going to do in the future. There's nothing to that beyond your thought. So another way of saying it is there's nothing else beyond thought. And I'm not saying that you're a thought. I'm saying that you think thoughts, which means you're from this thing called theos. We're going to call it theos. Theos is the source of thought. And theos can be understood by the truth and by the logos. So let's make this real simple. As you're going through life, the most important thing you can know is the logos, which is reason rooted in truth. You want to be connected to the truth at all times. What is right? What is wrong? Okay, that has to do with the truth. What is just? What is unjust? Right? What is justice? What is injustice? Right? All of these are connected to the truth, which is the logos. The indwelling wisdom is the logos, the mind of God. When you reject the logos and you lie to yourself and you commit injustice and you commit unrighteousness and you do evil, you've disconnected yourself from logos. You've disconnected yourself from the truth, and you're deceiving yourself. And that's, now you've rejected the logos, right? You've disconnected yourself from God and you're on a destructive path. So what I'm going to tell you is there's not a lot you have to know. And all the people that you could write endless self-help books, and you could make movies about all kinds of there. You could have politics, and you could have presidential elections, and you can have giant wars, and you can have all kinds of systems of civilization and barbarism. And as you go through that, you have to understand that the one thing that solves all these problems is the logos, the connection one maintains towards the truth and the indwelling truth, which is the logos. So when you take your child to school at 5 years old, which I believe is a crime against humanity, a small baby shouldn't be dropped off with strangers and to be raised by strangers. I don't know how it is in other countries, but in America, it's horrifying what they do to children here. But let's not get into that. You're inducted into this idea from a child that the wisdom or the truth and the knowledge comes from another human being that's instructing you, right? You're being instructed by some lady who, after work, she goes home and drinks and takes pills. Okay. And she's the one instructing you, or a man who has all kinds of personal issues, or you see, these are your teachers, these are your instructors. Okay. The only instructor you need is the logos, the indwelling truth, which is the source of all wisdom of the universe. It's the cause of the universe. It's the source of the universe. All that wisdom is already where you are because you're a human soul and you come from this thing called theos. You don't need there's nothing outside of you that's going to give you instruction. All the instruction comes from logos, and theos is known solely through the logos. So we have different religions. We have the rabbis are the instructors, and the pastors are the instructors, and the imams are the instructors, and the priests are the instructors. Are they really the instructors? No. The only instructor is the logos. And this is what the Athenians, to their credit, created this philosophy, which was frankly lost when it merged with Christianity. And then when the Romans then took over all of Europe and replaced everyone's philosophy with this new religion. But this Athenian philosophy of Gnosticism came first. It came first, and it merged with the people in Judea and was given a new theme. You see, the Athenian Stoics they're called Stoics because they met in halls which are called a stoa, which is like a platform with like a ceiling, and it's kind of like it's a stoa. Look up what a stoa is. So they were called the Stoics. Now, that doesn't mean that everything that these men said or wrote down was perfect or true, or everything that they did was correct or moral or immoral or whatever. That's not the point. The point is they understood that this logos was their instructor, and this is what they were tapping into. And there was a lot of them. So some of them wrote this and some of them wrote that. But the thing is, it doesn't matter what anyone else said. It's what the logos tells you. So long as it's really the logos and it's true. See, it has to be rooted in truth. Now, this is your instructor. This is your instructor from the time you're born to the rest of your life. Now, that makes me think of when people find a religion, they find Christianity, and they find some things in it that they really like. But then they read some other books and they find some things which they find horrifying. How do you square those two things? How do you say, well, this stuff's totally irrational and horrible, and this other stuff is beautiful and perfectly logical and is the logos? Well, you know the difference because you have the logos. You see, you have the logos. So when you're confronted by something that's irrational, you balk to it. You say, that's not correct. It's irrational. Why? Because you have the logos, right? When you abandon the logos, you've abandoned theos. You've abandoned, frankly, and you might not understand what I'm going to tell you, but you've abandoned Christ the King. See, when they wrote the Bible, they said that the logos was Christ the King, that he's the word of God, that he's the Messiah, which it is. You see, the logos is your Messiah. There is no other Messiah but the logos. The logos is the only way to God, called theos. There's no other way to God but the logos. There's no other way to theos but truth. That's the only way. There is no other way. So what else is there to say? So one of the things is, this is the most important thing that you can ever know. You're not going to get instruction from an outside thing. If you're reading, Paul, and he's going around and he sees a light coming out from the sky and he gets instructed from this thing outside, that's an illusion. Okay. And then he writes the rest of the books and he says that his way is the right way. Well, I'm telling you that the Logos only is your instructor. Nobody else. Nobody's your instructor. Muhammad, by his own account, married a 6-year-old and molested her when she was 9. That's not the Logos. That is not the Logos. That is not the Logos. That is not the gateway to Theos. So we can scratch that one off the list as being totally irrelevant. And all the rabbis with all their traditions and their ceremonies, and they're wrapping their arms and wearing things on their head and growing the locks long because they read it in a book of Egyptian. In Egypt, you ever seen that movie with, what was it, Charlton Heston, and he plays Moses, and you got the little kid, he's got the side lock. Right, in Egypt they had this thing called a side lock where they would grow the side of their hair on one side. Well, if you misunderstand that, you rewrite, you change from one language into another, and now you've rewritten in the, let's say 1,000 years later, you're reading a bad interpretation of what a side lock is supposed to be. Then you put them over here, okay, and you think that makes you holy. It doesn't. The only way you can get to God is through Logos, and this is what the Athenians developed back in 500 BC. So 500 years before Christ, they were worshiping the Logos, which we call Christ. And Christ means the anointed king. So the Logos is Christ, because the Logos, which dwells within you, the indwelling Logos, which is reason rooted in truth, the governing principle of the universe, that is the king. And that is the word of God. And that is the spoken word of God that you hear when you hear the truth. And you don't hear it with your ears. It's not an audible voice like I've heard some pastors say on the radio that are totally lunatics, to be honest with you. They're lunatics. It's not an audible voice. It's not a voice saying blah, 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 blah. It's not you don't hear it with your ears. You don't even hear it like let's say you hear a song that plays over in your head. You don't hear it like that either. It's not that. It's not really even a voice. It's just, you can't describe things without using terms and words that describe things in this universe. Okay, so the Logos is reason rooted in truth. You know the truth. It's not a voice telling you the truth. You just know the truth, and you know it because you have the Logos. You have that part of your soul, and that's where you quote unquote hear it, because you're not hearing it, you're knowing it, and that's your gateway to Theos. So the old philosophers of Athens, they followed the Logos and they worked at it, and that was their philosophy. That's how they lived. They got just dedicated to following this thing called the Logos. Now, when it was written into the Bible, it followed that same theme of the solar theme, and the solar theme is the biblical theme that the Israelites adopted to describe God and God's commandments, which are like the sun or the light. So it's different in Christianity because it was merged with this solar theme. And this doesn't mean that the Israelites were worshiping the sun, because they weren't. They were worshiping actually the Logos. And that's why these two religions were so compatible. But what happened with the Bible is they made it all into allegories and fictional accounts of the Logos, right? So where in Athens, it was purely scientific, and there was no religion or superstition connected with it at all. Whereas with the biblical account, it was part of this ancient tradition of the Israelites who came out of Egypt. and they started writing this stuff long before it. But it appears that they wrote their books before they contacted the Athenians, but they used the Athenian model of Theos Dia Logos, for knowing God through the Logos. They incorporated that into their philosophy when the Greeks came with Alexander and established the Seleucid and Ptolemaic kingdoms. That's when that integrated. So you integrated Athenian explanations of the Logos and Theos into the old Israelite books, which is why they rewrote all the books in Greek, and they used the word Theos for God in all of the ancient Israelite books, from Genesis through all the 5 books of Moses. The word Theos was written in because that explained for them what their books were about. Now, the truth is, originally, all the names of their gods were pagan. Okay, all the names of the god or God for the ancient Israelites were all originally pagan. They were all pagan because all these books came out of the pagan culture. You think of the Bible as a pyramid, and at that base of the pyramid, at the very bottom of the pyramid, as you go down layer after layer after layer, or you could think of it as in archaeology, when you're digging through a city and you get layer upon layer upon layer and upon layer. The further down you dig, you go earlier and earlier and earlier, right, into the soil, into the civilizations that were there before. Well, when you look at the history of the Bible, the further back you go into the sources of the Bible, you go into paganism. Paganism is the foundation of the Bible, but paganism, as I like to say, paganism is the road to monotheism. So out of paganism came monotheism through the Israelites. Out of paganism came monotheism through the Israelites, and then they merged with the Greeks from the Athenians, and were able to explain their entire religion through the very simple formula of Theos Dia Logos. God is known through the Logos, the truth, which is in the Israelite books. If you notice, there is God, and then there is his word, which are his commandments, which are like the sun, like the light, which follows the solar calendar, which starts in spring, and in the old calendar starts in spring and ends at the end of winter in February. So that's the old calendar, and that's the old religion, and that's the old system. When they came out of Egypt, was a solar theme. All the old books of Chaldea and Iraq, and all these old pagan books of Ugarit and Canaan and the ancient Edomites who they based the kings of Israel off of. Okay, those were all rewritten and given this new theme about a solar theme. They gave it a solar theme. Is what they did, and so they got that solar theme from Egypt. But when you read those books, you tend to think that God's out in space because it's based on a solar theme, and the sun, of course, is in space, and the stars, of course, are in space. So heaven is up there, and of course, God lives in heaven because that's where the lights come from. So you mistakenly believe that God is in space and God is out there, and so that the wisdom is out there somewhere, and you're down here and you don't know anything, and you're waiting forever for this thing to talk to you. When the truth is, the wisdom is already inside you, and there's nothing out there. There's nothing out there. That's a desert out there. It's a desert out there. It's an illusion. It's an illusion. It's very real. It's solid. I'm not saying it's not real. It is real because thoughts are real. Thoughts are real, and they appear as spaces and energy and objects. Thoughts are very real, and thoughts appear as objects. Okay, but beyond that, there's nothing. That's just a desert. Okay, that's a desert called the mind. The collective mind is a desert called the universe. So all the life in the universe is where you are, and that's where you find Theos, which is the source of the universe and all life and everything, and the source of reason. And Logos is reason, rooted in truth. It's the gateway to theos. It's how you find theos. Is you look, you have to be searching for the truth. What is the truth of every situation? What is the just thing to do? What is injustice? What is the right thing to do? What is the wrong thing to do? This is the core of logos and truth. Interestingly enough, this is all obviously this came out of Athens. It also came out of Egypt, which is very close to Athens, very close as far as sharing of information, geographically very close. I mean, it doesn't get any closer, right? Except for Judea, possibly. So the other idea is that, the mind of God. Why is this? Why do I keep using this term? This is also the terminology that was in the old story called, and I think everyone should read the story, particularly if you're a student of the Bible. The myth of Adapa. The myth of Adapa, which is an old Babylonian, Sumerian, Akkadian story that made its way into Egypt with the people that came down there. The what do we call them? We call them the Hebrew people, the Aramaic people, the Akkadian races that came into northern Egypt and brought this story with them. The myth of Adapa. And in the myth of Adapa, it's about the Anunnaki gods that were not aliens, but were the natural forces of nature. And when Enki, meaning the god of water, Enki, En means God, Ki means water. When Enki makes the man, he makes him exactly the way he wants him, mortal. But he gives him the mind of God. So he has the mind of God. And so because he has the mind of God, he has total consciousness and awareness, and he understands that he is mortal. And this is very troubling to him. And he gets in a boating accident when he's out fishing. And so he's really upset and frightened, and he smashes up these wings that make the air in the story, right? There's these I guess they're like these fans that blow the winds, and these fans were blowing too hard. It blew his ship against the rocks, and he got injured, and he was very upset. So he went and found the fans that were causing the wind, and he broke them. And so he was called before the gods, the Anunnaki gods, and Anu means Anu is god of the sky gods, the stars, right? Up in the stars. And he's called before them. And so Enki tells him, look, when you go there, they're going to offer you food and drinks, and don't eat it because it'll kill you, he tells him. And so he convinces this man that he made not to drink the drinks and not to eat any of this food because it'll kill him. And he doesn't want him to, he's looking out for him, right? The truth is, they just wanted to ask them, the Anunnaki gods just wanted to ask him what happened. And they were going to offer him immortality. They were going to offer him the food of immortality. But Enki, who made man, didn't want him to be immortal, didn't want him to be physically able to live forever. He wanted him to be just the way he made him, mortal man with the mind of God. So he tells him, when you go up there to meet the gods, don't eat or drink anything that they offer you because they're going to kill you. So he goes, fine, I won't. So he goes up there and he meets the Anunnaki gods, and they have a nice chat. They just want to talk to him and find out what happened. Why did you break these fans that were making the wind, right? And so they talk, and so after they discuss, what happened, and they offer him the food of immortality. They say, we're giving you this to eat and drink. And I don't know that they told him, but this was the food of immortality that they were offering him. And if he would have eaten it, or if he would have drinking it, he would have been immortal, and he wouldn't be threatened by this south wind fans and all this kind of stuff, and he'd never be in danger. But he rejected it because his creator Enki told him that this was going to kill him. So he rejects the food of immortality, and they never offer it to him again. He had one chance He had one chance to take the offer, and he rejected the offer, and so he remained mortal. And I guess he finds out about it later that he got lied to the whole time, and it was a big mess. But it's a story about human beings, and the idea in the story is that you have the mind of God, but you're mortal, so your flesh is subject to death, and so you go through life knowing that you're subject to death, but you have, because you have the mind of God, because you have the logos, you have consciousness and awareness, you have rationality, you have reason, you're able to understand what's happening to you. So there's a connection to the truth. And I just want to finish off with this. So when you're because I have a lot of discussions and debates with people, and what I'm telling you, just the logos is within you, is the most important thing anyone could ever tell you. Because once you find that, you don't need anyone else to tell you anything ever again, because you have all the wisdom and all the knowledge that you could ever need, and you can always know what's right and wrong. You can always stay connected to Theos through the logos forever. But you, like, let's say I've been arguing with Muslims, and I've been arguing with some atheists. And the atheist will always bring up this idea that the Bible's irrational. And how do you explain this? And how do you explain that? Well, they're looking at it because some of the Christian people are saying, this is all real. And there was a talking snake. Right? And it's like, no. That's not, it's an allegory, you see? It's an allegory. There wasn't a talking snake. It's an allegory. See, if you understand it as an allegory, which is how the original Israelites wrote it and understood it, then it makes perfect sense. It can make perfect sense. It's logical because it's an allegory. An allegory doesn't have to make sense, right? So the atheists say, how do you explain this? And the Muslims and the atheists do the exact same thing. How do you explain this? How do you explain? The Christians are like saying, because God just made it this way. I don't know. No, because the atheists are saying this is irrational. But see, what the atheists don't realize is that the logos is truth, reason rooted in truth. So I would try and tell them, well, see, the logos is reason. The logos is truth. And Jesus in the story is the truth. And Jesus in the story is the logos. And the logos is put to death at Golgotha, you see? And they just won't go down that road, because now they have to admit that everything in the Bible is true. You see, now they have to admit it's all true. See, if you understand that it's an allegory, now it's all true. Every word of it's true. See, Jesus is the truth. The truth is arrested and tortured and put to death at a place called Golgotha. Well, that's all true. But you can't admit that's true. You can't admit that Jesus is a synonym for light, and it's a synonym for the logos. It's a synonym for truth and wisdom. You can't admit that, because then the whole book makes sense. See, so that's how irrational they actually are on the subject. So these kind of arguments have made people stay in their little irrational boxes, is what I'm trying to say, right? They can't just understand how things are, and they don't want to admit anything. But what I'm going to tell you is that the logos is reason, and the logos is how you get to Theos. It's the only way to Theos. And what does the Bible say? It says Jesus is the only way. There's not another way, because Jesus represents in the story. Jesus is the logos. Jesus is the light. Light means wisdom. Light means truth. Jesus is the truth, right? In the story, in the allegory. See, if you understand that, then it's all true. It's all true. It's all perfectly true as an allegory. If you try to say that it's a historical event, and you get Christians and they say, the Shroud of Turin proves that Jesus was real. Well, that's not the logos. What are you talking about? Why are you trying to turn Jesus into a man? Why are you trying to turn the logos into something it's not? Why don't you just find the logos? That is your Messiah. The Messiah is the logos. Your king is the logos. You're looking in the wrong direction if you're looking in a history book and trying to say, well, this Roman guy said he really existed, and he had this, he looked like this, and he was this tall, and he had a bob cut, and what are you talking about? What are you talking about? That's not the logos. See, now you're off in some weird direction. And Jesus, he went to India and he lived in India. He would tell you, and he practiced Hinduism. Shut up. That's not the logos, dude. That's not the logos. That's not the truth. Okay. You want the logos. The logos dwells within you. The logos is your Messiah. The logos is the quote unquote word of God, because it's the truth that comes to you, not as an audible thing you hear. You're not hearing it with your ears. You're not hearing it like it's playing over in your mind like a song you heard before. It's just the truth that's being spoken to you from Theos. Theos is speaking to you as the logos. You have God speaking to you all the time, trying to tell you what to do, trying to tell you what is right, what is wrong. How many crackheads and people doing fentanyl and all engaging in all kinds of crime and perversion and abuse and abusing themselves and abusing others, that are just totally rejecting the truth, rejecting the logos, rejecting rejecting Theos, which is right there with them all the time, nudging at them, trying to tell them to stop doing that and to go on the righteous road. Well, that's the story of the Bible. Read Proverbs. Read Proverbs. Proverbs is about the logos. Proverbs 8:22 is, in my opinion, a perfect example of an explanation for Christ, the firstborn of God. Well, you can't describe God. You can't describe Theos. It's indescribable, okay? How do you describe something that's not matter, energy, space, or time, or in this universe? How do you describe Theos? How do you describe it? You can only understand it through the truth, through the logos. That's how you can know something about it. That's the only way you can know anything about it, is through the truth, which appears in your soul, and speaks to your soul, but not with words and not with voices and nothing else but the truth. I can't stress this enough, but this is, and the reason I can't stress this enough, because the world is filled with garbage information. There's all kinds of information all over the internet, all over cable news and Fox News and MSNBC and CNN and financial this and that, and all these other channels of all these other governments around the world, and none of it's telling you about the logos. None of it's telling you to find the logos. And we had this philosophy one time that came out of Athens, which had the whole thing right there for you to have, and it got absorbed into, well, it got merged with in Judea, and then it got absorbed by the Romans into this other thing, where now God's back out in space somewhere, and you'll never find him. You got to wait forever, and you have to be good, otherwise you get tortured and killed. And originally that was supposed to be an allegory, right? Right. If you don't follow the logos, you're going to be tortured and killed by yourself. You see, you're going to go to the grave. You're going to go there physically. You're going to go there spiritually. You're going to be destroyed. See, that's why you follow the logos. That's why Theos is there to speaking to you through the logos, through your soul. You see, but then they turned it into something where God's out in space and he's out there judging you from a cloud. That's not how it works. So that's the opposite of Gnosticism, and that's why you need a priest. And the priest is your priest, or let's say the Pope, right? Now he's your mediator, not the logos that's within you, right? Which is the truth. But now it's some guy in another city, in the capital in Europe, in Rome. He's the mediator, and he tells you what's right, and he tells you what's wrong, and that's all, frankly, nonsense. And it's nonsense when the Pope does it, and it's nonsense when the rabbi does it, and it's nonsense when the imam does it, or anybody else, or a teacher, or some crazy lady with rainbow hair who's your kindergarten teacher, or whoever. All these people are trying to impose their will on you, which isn't even their will, it's just their insanity. When God's will is the truth. God's will, Theos, the will of Theos is known by logos, is known by the truth. Aletheia, the truth. Althea or aletheia, the truth. It's a Greek word for the truth. So that's it. There's nothing else. Yeah, yeah. You may need to. Maybe you need to learn. Maybe you need to learn how to do mechanical engineering, or you need to learn a trade. Those are things you can learn from other people. Yeah, you can. You know, you can learn that. But ultimately, even mathematics comes from within. Just give a toddler a ball and tell the toddler to throw the ball in a hoop or into a you know hit it with a baseball bat. That's physics. That's mathematics, right? You have the application. That's like the application of force towards an incoming object. Like there's all kinds of math that goes into that that just naturally occurs. You don't have to go learn physics and trigonometry in order to throw a basketball through a hoop. You look at the hoop and you determine how much force is needed to send the ball through the air, right? That's physics. There's a whole science of that. So you can mathematically map all that out. And you can call that mathematics. You can call it trigonometry or physics or nuclear physics or whatever you have. But it all just comes naturally from God, from Theos. So ultimately what I'm saying is it all that spirit, Theos, the logos, the truth, all that stuff that's everything. That is everything. It's the source of the universe. It's the source of the universe. It's what you already have. And so this is Gnosticism. It's not numerology and sex magic and making weird symbols and all kinds of weird stuff and paganism or whatever. It's none of that. It never was. It was guys in Athens who were trying to find what is the ultimate, what is the one thing, what is the one thing that they need to know that solves all the problems in the world. And that word they came up with is logos. That logos was the gateway to God. That logos solves all the problems. And that when people don't have logos, they commit evil. And when they do have logos, they engage in righteousness and justice because they have the logos. And the logos comes from Theos. And Theos is known by the logos. And there's nothing else I can say about it because I'll just be saying that over and over and over again. So I hope you get it. I hope you get it. I hope you understand because there's nothing else I can tell you that's more important than that. And there's nothing anybody can tell you that's more important than that. That's the most important thing you can know. And if you don't know it, you are to some degree misled, deceived. But you should know it. I'm just reminding you, really. I'm just trying to remind you of what you should, that you already have. I already know you have the logos. I see it all the time in everybody. Anytime somebody runs into something that's irrational, that doesn't make sense, that proves they have the logos because they reject irrationality. Now, when they buy into the irrationality and they dramatize and take on all this irrationality and sickness and mental illness, they've gone off the deep end. Okay, and we have a lot of that in society too. It's all cured by the logos, and in Christianity, would say it's all cured by Christ. But Christ means the anointed king. So when we say the anointed king, well, what's the anointed? Who is it? What is the king? The king would be the logos. The logos is the king, and the logos is the gateway to Theos. There is no other way. I will finish off with that. Thanks for watching.